real solutions on that. Because if they don't, the country is going to suffer.
Bruce, you can jump in on that, or I have a different question for you. And excuse the breakup of his audio sometimes. Bruce is coming to us from Uganda. So what I wanted to ask is, if with all of your international experience, if you have any little lessons for us or anything that we could, bring to the U.S. to help matters here that you've experienced.
One of the things I have discerned, lessons we can learn from others around the world. Our inherent value system is absolutely fundamental to everything else we do in our society. Our personal freedoms, our political freedoms, our economic freedoms are all dependent upon our cultural values. One, for example, to set the benefit of the good of all over the good myself, and serving as a servant leader, realizing that we rise and fall as a community. And I think about the Mobutu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, traditional values in Zimbabwe, and while they're trying to recapture that value system. So whatever we do to recapture strong traditional values is probably our society.
Mark, do you have something to throw in on that one? I feel like you might.
I think the fact that one of the African countries is attempting to recapture that traditional culture, that's something we should look at very seriously, because culture is upstream from politics, and that's a very significant fact.
Robin, do you think we can turn the corner here? Do you think we have to hit some sort of rock bottom?
Ooh, my goodness. Have we not already hit a rock bottom? I just want us to accept the election results. I just want to start there. Whoever wins this election, great. And whoever doesn't, can they just peacefully transition power, acknowledge that they lost, and move on? I mean, I miss the days when we used to have that. But more than anything, I think it goes back to the family unit. iPads and iPhones are not babysitters. We need to be spending more quality time with our children and teaching them these civic lessons. I mean, it's great that we have a problem solvers caucus. I just learned about that now. Thanks, Mark. But we need to be solving some of the problems at home and raising our children to respect one another in spite of our political differences. Because we as adults are divided along party lines right now and seeing our neighbors as blue or red. But if we can teach our children to respect one another in spite of our differences, we might just save this American experiment.
Yeah, it's interesting that a lot of the isms are, seen as a problem, but partyism is totally fine. You're allowed to say anything negative about someone who belongs to a different political party. Even dating apps now, right? The research is that people don't even want to date someone who's, from a different political party. So, Bruce, the power of leading by example. Go right ahead.
Yeah, honestly, in our society, there's more that binds us together and separates us. If we major on the major issues and not major on the minor issues, we'll go much further. Unfortunately, the human is the laziest muscle of the body. And as Henry Ford pointed out, thinking is the hardest work there is to do. That's why so few people invest in it. Much easier to think stereotypically than precisely. And those values, as Robin is pointing out, our families are the foundation stone of our society, and we need to do things that strengthen them rather than weaken them.
And Mark, people might think that we're at the worst time ever. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. Politics never been so divided. But taking a more historical perspective, I know you're a bit of a American history geek. So is there any lessons that can give us heart from history?
Well, obviously, the period immediately preceding, the 4 years preceding the Civil War, we discovered that we did, in fact, have irreconcilable differences on one very fundamental issue, and we see what the result of that is. I don't think abortion might be the exception, but I don't think any of the other issues that we face today even begin to approach the degree of intensity and therefore irreconcilable differences as we had before the Civil War.
I'm glad you
I'm
saved that
actually-
one. Sorry, I'm glad you saved that one. I was worried that you were comparing us to the time before the Civil War, and we know how that went. So, okay, carry on.
I'm actually quite optimistic. I guess it's because I come from a Reagan background, and I'm an optimist about this country's ability to overcome things. And one of the things that President Biden has said multiple times that I think is absolutely true is when we get together, America can do anything. Let's not forget that. Let's not lose that.
Robin, do you think there's any, Mark, you mentioned abortion, but to be honest, if you look at opinion polls, there's a lot of agreement. Most people have a very moderate consensus across the nation on abortion. So, Robin, do you think that there's any issues that are so intransigent that, it'll come to pitchforks and guns?
Like I said, just elections themselves. We can't. One other thing that Biden said was that you can't just love your country when you win. We're all Americans. We're all in this together. But one thing that I think that we can come together in agreement on is food insecurity, because 17.3% of Americans are food insecure. That's 7.3 million Americans. Of that, 12.8% of those are children in schools that aren't getting 3 solid meals a day. I think that's something that there's tremendous potential for us to work across party lines to make sure that at a minimum, that people are getting fed and that school children go to school with full bellies so they can learn.
Okay, we really seem to be solving some problems here. How about you, Bruce? Are there any issues that seem intransigent, but actually we can find solutions for?
I think virtually every issue we have before us, we can find solutions if we're willing to work together, listen intently to all sides, come up with mutually agreeable solutions. They may not be perfect, but they'll go a long way to reaching a middle ground. The abortion issue may be something that's challenging, but even I think that can be resolved, as Mark pointed out that issue. But we've survived for hundreds of years now and gone through massive points of division, and so I think we can afford and should be optimistic about our society and this great experiment.
Okay, we have just a little bit of time left. So that was your last word, Bruce. And for our other two, give us some final words to give people that heart that we just heard about, for finding a compromise and making this all work. Mark.
I'm actually tremendously encouraged by this discussion that we've had here today. Byro and I have discovered a couple of things that we didn't know we agreed on. Bruce has had some great wisdom to share about a number of things. This is a good example of what can happen, and let's hope that more of it does take place.
Excellent. All right, Robin, your last word for us.
Mark is right. If we just simply talk to our neighbors as human beings and listen, do more listening, less talking, I think that we'll be better off for it. And at the end of the day, we all bleed red. We're more common than we are different. Treat your neighbor like you yourself want to be treated. We all teach our children to live by the golden rule, but we need to abide by that ourselves. And then we'll be off to a good start.
All right, excellent. I would like to thank you all. That concludes our discussion today. Thank you, W. Bruce Lee, Robin Byro, and Mark Tapscott.
Thank you so much.